The wine glass fell of her hands the second she saw the ring on the other woman's finger. The sound echoed through the restaurant, silverware froze mid-air, and every head turned to watch Amara standing there, chest heaving, tears refusing to fall because she refused to give him that satisfaction. Min-jun stood frozen beside a woman in a red dress, his mouth open, no words coming out. 7 years. 7 good years of her life poured into a man who could not even look her in the eye now, 7 good years of her waiting for him, the man she sacrificed almost all HCR for. But success has a way of rewriting a man's memory. If you have ever given everything to someone only to watch them hand your future to a stranger, you need to see how this story ends. Hit subscribe right now, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and smash that like button, because what happens next will make your blood boil. 3 years earlier, Amara sold her car to pay for Min-jun's business license. She did not think twice. She worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse's aide, came home smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion, and still found the strength to proofread his business proposals until 2 in the morning. Min-jun was brilliant but broke, a Korean immigrant with a dream of building a logistics company and nothing but unpaid invoices to show for it. Amara believed in him before the banks did, before his own family did. "I don't have collateral, I don't have credit, no one is going to lend to me," Min-jun said one night, his head in his hands at their tiny kitchen table. "You have me," Amara said. "That's collateral enough." She emptied her savings account. She pawned the gold bracelet her late mother left her. She co-signed a loan using her name because his credit history was too thin to qualify a loan. Friends warned her. "Amara, you're putting your name on his debt. What if this doesn't work out?" Her best friend Ngozi asked her one evening, worry lacing every word. "It will work out because I will make sure it works out," Amara answered, and she meant it with her whole chest. There was a night, early on, when Min-jun nearly gave up entirely. A shipment got seized at customs over a paperwork error, wiping out nearly all their remaining savings in fines and storage fees. He sat on the floor of their apartment, back against the wall, staring at nothing. "I should just get a regular job. Stop dragging you down with me," he said, voice hollow. Amara sat down beside him, took his face in her hands, and looked him directly in the eyes. "Listen to me. You are not dragging me down. I chose this. I choose you. We are going to figure this out together, one shipment, one contract, one mistake at a time. Do you understand me?" Min-jun broke down crying that night, the kind of crying men do when they have spent months holding themselves together for everyone else. "Nobody has ever believed in me the way you do, Amara. Not my parents, not my old friends, nobody." "Then let me be the first," she whispered, holding him until his shaking stopped. That memory alone was the reason Amara stayed as long as she did, long after the warning signs began flashing red, because some part of her kept waiting for that same man, the one who cried gratitude into her shoulder on the floor of a cheap apartment, to come back and remember exactly who helped carry him out of nothing. For 2 years she watched him grind. She watched him lose contracts and win small ones. She was there the night his first major shipment cleared customs without a hitch, screaming with joy in their cramped apartment, popping a cheap bottle of sparkling wine because that was all they could afford. She was there when the electricity got cut off because they diverted the bill money into his warehouse rent. She never complained. She told herself love meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant this was temporary. Then the contracts got bigger. A shipping deal with a conglomerate in Busan changed everything. Within 18 months, Min-jun's company exploded from 4 employees to 40. Money that used to feel like a distant dream now sat comfortably in company accounts. He upgraded his wardrobe first, then his car, then his apartment. Amara told herself this was the reward for their years of struggle. She imagined the wedding they always talked about, finally within reach. But success has a way of rewriting a man's memory. Min-jun's mother visited once during this period, a rare trip from Korea to see how far her son had come. She sat stiffly across from Amara at dinner, polite but cool, the kind of coolness that spoke louder than any insult. "My son has worked very hard to get here," his mother said, watching Amara carefully. "He has. I'm very proud of him," Amara replied warmly, reaching for Min-jun's hand under the table. His mother's eyes flicked to their joined hands, then back to her plate. It's important he surrounds himself with people who match where he is going. Not just where he came from. Min-jun laughed it off nervously, squeezing Amora's hand once before letting go entirely too quickly. Amara noticed. She filed it away quietly, the same way she filed away every small wound in those months, telling herself none of it mattered as long as he still loved her. Min-jun started attending business dinners without her. It's just networking, you wouldn't enjoy it, he told her the first time. She believed him. The second time he said the same thing, something in her chest tightened, quiet and small, easy to ignore. The third time, she noticed he had started wearing cologne she did not recognize. New cologne, she asked casually, folding his shirts on their bed. A colleague recommended it, he said quickly, too quickly, already reaching for his jacket. Which colleague? She pressed gently. Amara, does it matter? It's just cologne, he said, irritation creeping into his voice for something so small, which was exactly what made it feel so large. She let it go that time, folding the last shirt in silence, though the ache settling into her chest told her this was only the beginning of questions she was not ready to ask out loud. One evening, at a small gathering of his growing circle of business associates, someone asked Min-jun how he got his start. He laughed, easy and confident, and said, I built this from nothing, just grit and a lot of sleepless nights. Amara stood right beside him, holding a glass of water because she could not afford to drink at those events even now, and waited for her name to appear somewhere in that story. It never did. She smiled anyway, because making a scene in front of his new friends felt smaller than the humiliation already sitting in her chest. Later that night in the car, she brought it up gently. You didn't mention me tonight. When they asked how you started. She kept her voice soft, hoping he would simply apologize and the ache in her chest would ease. It's not that deep, Amara. People don't want a whole speech, they just want a quick answer, Min-jun said, eyes on the road, tone flat. It's not about the speech. It's about credit, she said quietly. You want credit? Fine. Thank you for helping me. Happy, he said, and the sarcasm landed like a slap. Amara turned to the window and said nothing else for the rest of the ride. That was the first night she cried after he fell asleep, careful to keep her breathing steady so he would not wake up and ask what was wrong, because some part of her was terrified of the answer she might actually give him. It was at one of those dinners that he met Yuna. Yuna was polished in a way that made old money look effortless, though anyone who looked closely would notice her stories about family wealth never quite added up. She wore a soft smile that made men feel like the most important person in the room, and she had built an entire life around finding rooms full of important men. She found Min-jun fascinating not because of his ambition, but because of his bank balance, and the way he still carried the insecurity of someone who remembered being poor. Men like that, she had learned, were the easiest to control, because they were terrified of ever going back to nothing, and desperate to prove they now belonged among the wealthy. You built all of this yourself? Yuna asked him at that first dinner, her eyes wide with practiced admiration. With a lot of help, Min-jun said, glancing away, thinking of Amara for just a second before Yuna's laughter pulled his attention back. Modesty. I like that, Yuna said, leaning in just enough to make him forget the sentence he had started. He came home late that night. Amara had waited up with dinner going cold on the stove, the same way she used to wait up during the hard years, except now the waiting felt different. Heavier. How was the dinner? She asked. Fine. Just business, he said, not meeting her eyes, already walking past her toward the bedroom. Something in Amara's stomach turned, quiet and cold. She said nothing. She told herself she was imagining things. She told herself 7 years of loyalty could not be undone by one dinner. She was wrong, and deep down, some part of her already knew it. The late nights became more frequent. The excuses became thinner. Min-jun started keeping his phone face down on every surface, something he never used to do. He flinched when it buzzed during dinner, and once, when Amara reached for it to check the time, he snatched it away so fast the movement startled them both. Since when do you hide your phone from me? Amara asked, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. I'm not hiding anything, you're being paranoid, Min-jun snapped, and the sharpness in his tone was new. 7 years and he had never spoken to her like that. Amara swallowed the hurt. She told herself stress from the business was changing him. She told herself once the company stabilized, the old Min-jun would come back, the one who used to hold her hand under restaurant tables when they could not afford dessert, the one who once cried in gratitude when she gave him her mother's bracelet to pawn for his dream. But the old Min-jun was disappearing a little more every single day, replaced by a man drunk on new money and a woman who knew exactly how to keep him intoxicated. Ngozi noticed the change before Amara was willing to admit it out loud. They met for coffee on a rare afternoon Amara had free, and Ngozi studied her friend's tired eyes for a long moment before speaking. "You've lost weight again. And not the good kind," Ngozi said. "I'm fine, work has just been a lot," Amara said, stirring a coffee she had no intention of finishing. "Amara, I've known you 11 years. You get quiet like this when something is eating you alive. Is it Min-jun?" Amara's silence answered before her words did. "He's been distant. Distracted. There's this woman from one of his business dinners, Yuna, her name keeps coming up," Amara admitted, her voice cracking slightly on the name, as if saying it made the fear more real. "Have you asked him directly? He says it's just business." Ngozi reached across the table and took her hand. "You gave that man everything, Amara. Your money, your time, your name on his loans. If he is doing what I think he's doing, you deserve to know the truth before you lose anything else." "I don't want to believe it," Amara whispered. "I know. But believing a lie because the truth is too painful has never protected anyone," Ngozi said gently, and those words stayed with Amara long after they said goodbye that afternoon, echoing in her mind every time Min-jun's phone buzzed and he turned it face down without looking up. Yuna was patient. She never asked Min-jun for anything directly. That was the trick. She let him offer. She mentioned once, in passing, how she had always dreamed of owning a boutique but could never afford the startup costs, and 3 days later Min-jun transferred $40,000 into an account for her, calling it an investment. She mentioned once that her rent had increased and she might have to move somewhere further from the city, and within a week he was quietly paying her lease. Every gift came wrapped in the language of investment and business partnership, but Amara, the woman who spent 7 years reading his financial documents, could see exactly what these transactions were. She finally met Yuna face to face at a company anniversary event Min-jun could not avoid inviting her to, given she was still, on paper, his fiancée. Yuna approached Amara at the bar with a glass of champagne and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You must be Amara. Min-jun talks about you sometimes," Yuna said, her tone dipped in false sweetness. "Does he?" Amara replied flatly, refusing to give this woman the reaction she clearly came looking for. "He mentioned you helped him a lot in the early days. That must feel good, watching how far he's come," Yuna said, eyes flicking deliberately toward the diamond bracelet on her own wrist, a bracelet Amara recognized instantly because she had seen the receipt for it buried in Min-jun's business account weeks earlier. "It felt good building something real. I hope whatever you're building lasts as long," Amara said, holding Yuna's gaze without blinking. Yuna's smile flickered, just barely. "Business relationships evolve, Amara. People grow, priorities change. You of all people should understand that, given how much you've already given up for him." "I understand exactly what's happening here," Amara said quietly, stepping closer, low enough that only Yuna could hear her. "I also understand women like you always eventually get exposed. It's simply a matter of time." She walked away before Yuna could respond, her hands trembling with restrained fury the entire drive home, the seed of her investigation planted firmly that very night. She found the transfers by accident, going through old joint business files to help him prepare for a tax audit, the same unpaid labor she always did for him. Her fingers went cold scrolling through the numbers. 40,000 here. 18,000 there. A car lease payment under a name she did not recognize. She confronted him that night, the folder shaking in her hands. "Who is Yuna Park?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, terrified of the answer she already suspected. Min-jun's face drained of color. "She's an investor. A business contact. An investor gets equity, Min-jun. A business contact does not get her rent paid," Amara said, the folder falling from her hands, papers scattering across the floor like the last pieces of her denial. "You don't understand business, Amara, you never have," he said, and those words cut deeper than any admission of guilt could have, because they were meant to make her feel small, meant to make her doubt the very intelligence that helped build his empire from nothing. If you are feeling that same anger rising in your chest right now, that is exactly the reaction this story deserves. Comment below the moment you realized someone was taking you for granted, hit that subscribe button so you never miss how far this betrayal goes, and like this video if you believe loyalty should never be repaid with lies. Amara did not scream. She did not throw anything, not yet. She simply looked at him, 7 years of memories flashing behind her eyes, and asked one question that broke something inside her voice. Did you sleep with her? Min-jun hesitated too long before answering. No. It's not like that. But his hesitation was the loudest confession he could have given. That night, Amara could not sleep. She lay awake beside a man who felt like a stranger, replaying every late dinner, every hidden phone, every distracted glance during conversations that used to hold his full attention. She thought about the years she spent skipping meals so he could eat properly before big meetings. She thought about the nights she stayed up rewriting his emails to investors because his English was still shaky back then. She thought about her mother's bracelet, gone forever, pawned for a dream that was slowly turning into someone else's reward. She decided she needed proof, real proof, not just financial transfers that could be explained away with clever business language. She hired a private investigator the following week, a quiet, methodical woman named Grace who had handled cases like this before and warned Amara plainly. Once I start digging, you can't unknow what I find. Are you sure you want this? Grace asked her across a small office table. I have given that man 7 years of my life. I deserve to know exactly what I'm still giving him, Amara answered without hesitation. Grace's investigation moved fast. Within 2 weeks she had hotel records, a pattern of withdrawals, and something Amara had not expected at all, records showing Yuna Park had used at least 2 other names in 2 other cities, attached to 2 other relationships with wealthy men whose businesses had quietly collapsed within a year of dating her. Amara stared at the file for a long time before closing it, her hands steady now in a way they had not been in weeks. She started paying closer attention after that. She noticed the way his assistant would suddenly go quiet whenever Amara walked into his office unannounced. She noticed a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket, dated for a weekend he told her he spent at a conference in another city, except the hotel was only 20 minutes from their home. She said nothing. She waited. She watched. And then, 3 weeks later, she found the engagement ring. Not the one he had given her 5 years ago, small and modest, bought with money they barely had. A new one. Sitting in a velvet box tucked inside his desk drawer, far larger than anything he had ever given Amara, with a receipt showing a jeweler she had never even heard him mention. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the box. She did not confront him with tears. She confronted him with a plan. If Min-jun wanted to play the part of a man who had forgotten every sacrifice that built his empire, she would make sure he remembered in front of everyone who mattered to his new image. She learned, through his assistant who still respected her enough to answer an honest question, that he had booked a private dinner at the same restaurant where he first met Yuna, the very place their story of betrayal began. It was meant to be a quiet proposal, an intimate moment between 2 people building a future on a foundation Amara had poured herself into brick by brick. In the days leading up to it, Amara barely slept, running through every possible version of what she would say, every possible way this could go wrong. Ngozi stayed with her the night before. You don't have to do this in public, Amara. You could just leave quietly, Ngozi said, worried. I gave 7 years of my life quietly. I'm done being quiet, Amara said, folding the investigator's file closed and placing it carefully into her bag. She arrived in a simple black dress, no jewelry except her mother's old wedding band she kept even after the bracelet was gone, and walked into that restaurant like a woman who had nothing left to lose because everything had already been taken from her. Min-jun was on one knee when she reached the table. Yuna's hand was extended, tears of practiced joy already glistening in her eyes, the entire restaurant watching a proposal that was supposed to be perfect. Before you answer him, Amara said, her voice cutting through the silence like glass, you should know whose money bought that ring. The restaurant fell silent. Min-jun froze mid-kneel, his face a mixture of horror and humiliation. 7 years ago I sold my car for his business license. I pawned my mother's bracelet for his warehouse. I co-signed loans with my name because his credit was worthless. Every contract this man has ever signed, I helped write. Every dollar in that ring box, some of it still traces back to money I sacrificed to build, Amara said, and this time, her voice did not shake. Yuna's smile faltered for the first time since she walked into Min-jun's life. Is this true? Yuna asked him, her tone suddenly sharper, less rehearsed. Amara, please, not here, Min-jun begged, rising from his knee, reaching for her arm. Not here, Amara repeated, pulling away from his grip. You chose here. You chose this exact restaurant to propose to the woman you cheated with. I'm simply finishing the scene you started. This is the moment loyalty finally stood up for itself, and if you have ever wanted to see betrayal answered with truth instead of silence, make sure you are subscribed, because the next part of this story is going to expose exactly who Yuna really is. Drop a comment if you think Amara deserves an apology he can never give, and like this video to support women who refuse to shrink themselves for men who forget where they came from. What Min-jun did not know, what he never bothered to investigate because Yuna's charm blinded him completely, was that Yuna Park was not new money hiding old family wealth. She was a woman who had done this exact routine 3 times before, in 3 different cities, with 3 different wealthy men who mistook her attention for love. The private investigator Amara hired weeks earlier had already compiled the file. 2 of those previous men had lost significant portions of their fortune to businesses Yuna convinced them to fund, businesses that folded within a year, with Yuna walking away with settlements, gifts, and property deeds that never quite made it back to their rightful owners. Amara placed the folder on the table beside the ring box. Ask her about Daniel Osei in Atlanta. Ask her about Hyunwoo Choi in Seoul. Ask her why both of their companies collapsed within a year of dating her, Amara said, watching Yuna's carefully constructed composure crack into something desperate and cold. This is ridiculous, he's making things up, Yuna said, her accent slipping for just a moment into something far less polished than the persona she had built. But Min-jun was already reaching for the folder, his hands trembling as he read names and numbers that matched patterns too precise to be coincidence. The color drained from his face as reality set in. He had spent months defending Yuna against Amara's growing suspicion, calling his fiancée paranoid, insecure, ungrateful, only to discover the woman he abandoned everything for was running the same manipulation that had already destroyed 2 other men's fortunes. The restaurant, still watching, saw Yuna rise from the table without another word, snatching her purse and walking out into the night, abandoning the ring, abandoning the act, abandoning Min-jun the moment the money and reputation attached to him became a liability instead of an asset. Min-jun sat alone at that table, the ring box still open beside him, a room full of strangers now aware of exactly what kind of man he had become. He looked up at Amara, desperation replacing the arrogance he had worn like armor for the past several months. Amara, I made a mistake. Please, let's fix this, he said, reaching for her hand one final time. Amara looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who once cried thanking her for believing in him when no one else did, now reduced to a stranger who nearly threw away 7 years of sacrifice for a woman who saw him as nothing more than a paycheck with a heartbeat. You didn't make a mistake, Min-jun. You made a choice. And now I'm making mine, she said, sliding the folder toward him one last time before turning and walking out of that restaurant with her head high, her dignity intact, and her future finally, completely, her own. The story spread fast through his business circle, the way scandals always do among people who have nothing better to talk about at their next dinner. 2 of his largest investors called an emergency meeting within weeks of the failed proposal, word of the restaurant scene having already spread through the tight circle of Korean business associates who all seemed to know someone who had been there that night. We built this partnership on trust in your judgment, Min-jun. Right now, that judgment looks compromised, one investor said bluntly across the boardroom table. This is a personal matter, it has nothing to do with the company, Min-jun argued, though the shake in his voice betrayed him. When a woman connected to 2 other collapsed companies gets photographed accepting your proposal, and your own fiancé exposes it publicly, it becomes everyone's business, the investor replied coldly, sliding a folder of his own across the table, this one detailing the exact percentage of shares they intended to pull. Min-jun sat alone in his office long after the meeting ended, staring at spreadsheets that no longer made sense without Amora's steady hand quietly correcting his errors behind the scenes for years. He tried calling his old accountant, the one Amara had originally found and trained, only to learn she had already resigned 2 weeks earlier, unwilling to keep covering for mistakes that used to never happen when Amara managed the books. His mother called him once during this period, her voice cold in a way it had never been before. "I told you to be careful who you surround yourself with. Not that woman you left behind. The one you replaced her with." "Amara wasn't right for where I was going," Min-jun said weakly, even he no longer believing the words as they left his mouth. "And where exactly are you going now, without her?" his mother asked, and he had no answer for her. 6 months later, Min-jun's company faced an internal audit after investors grew suspicious of the same financial irregularities Amara once helped hide out of loyalty. Without her steady hand managing his books and covering his blind spots, cracks that had always existed began to show. Contracts fell through. Partners grew nervous. The empire he built on Amara's sacrifice began quietly crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance, exactly the way empires do when the foundation walks away. Amara, meanwhile, used the settlement from their joint business dissolution to open something entirely her own, a small logistics consulting firm built on every skill she had spent 7 years mastering in service of someone else's dream. Within a year, her client list included companies twice the size of what Min-jun once ran. She never heard from Yuna again. She heard from Min-jun exactly once, a long message full of apologies and regret, admitting he threw away the only woman who ever truly believed in him for the illusion of a woman who never believed in anything except what she could take. Amara never replied. Ngozi visited her new office a few months after it opened, walking through the small but tidy space filled with framed contracts and a wall calendar packed with client meetings. "You built this in less than a year," Ngozi said, genuinely amazed. "I built the last company too. I just didn't get my name on the door that time," Amara said, a small, satisfied smile crossing her face for the first time in a long while. "How do you feel, seeing everything falling apart for him?" Amara thought about it honestly before answering. "I don't feel joy in his downfall. I feel peace in my own rebuilding. Those are different things, and only one of them matters to me now." She kept her mother's wedding band on a chain around her neck, not as a reminder of what she lost, but as a reminder of where her strength had always come from, long before Min-jun ever entered her life. She dated no one for the first several months, choosing instead to rebuild the parts of herself she had quietly sacrificed piece by piece over 7 years, learning slowly that the version of her that existed before him had never actually disappeared, only waited patiently to be found again. Min-jun, meanwhile, sent one more message nearly a year later, this time asking if they could meet in person, insisting he had changed, insisting the collapse of his company had taught him everything he failed to learn from her sacrifice. Amara read the message twice, closed her phone, and went back to the client proposal she was finishing, because some doors, once closed with enough clarity, are simply not meant to be reopened. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do after giving everything to the wrong person is simply stand up, dust herself off, and build something the betrayal could never touch. If this story taught you anything about recognizing your worth before someone else forgets it for you, make sure you are subscribed to this channel so you never miss a story like this again. Drop a comment telling me if Amara made the right choice walking away, and like this video one final time to remind every person watching that sacrifice should never be repaid with betrayal. Share this with someone who needs to hear that walking away from the wrong person is sometimes the greatest act of self-respect there is. Loyalty should build a future, never fund someone else's betrayal.